Putin's so-called special military operation in Ukraine has been barbaric, brutal, and deadly. Obviously for Ukraine, but also for Russia's people. Unable to move on from the Soviet-era tactics where soldiers are little more than cannon fodder to sacrifice for the greater good, Russia has churned through 1.44 million soldiers and counting, and it will likely have gone through well beyond the 1.5 million mark by the end of 2026. Putin's war has taken a huge toll on Russia. Now Putin is planning something that will devastate the entire country. A sacrifice so dark that it would make even Stalin look away is being planned. 500,000 Russians have just been put on notice as Putin prepares to make the most horrific move he's made so far in the Ukraine war. On July 27th, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy delivered the warning. Russia is preparing to forcibly draft up to 500,000 soldiers. Also that Putin can sustain a war that has already failed to achieve every goal that he set for it back in 2022. This is mobilization on a scale not yet seen during the conflict, as Putin is preparing to tell his people that they must sacrifice even more than they already have to see his vision for a subjugated Ukraine come true. Putin isn't ready to end the war, Zelenskyy warns, and he has been putting steps in place to allow him to execute a mobilization as secretly as possible so he can avoid the wrath of his own people. He will do it at the beginning of October if we do not create problems for him with logistics, weapons, gasoline, diesel, and if our partners do not introduce total sanctions for his aggression, Zelenskyy declared. That month is important. Putin is choosing it for a reason. Between September 18th and 20th, Russia will hold its first State Duma elections since Putin launched his invasion. The new Eurasian Strategies Center says that 450 deputies will be elected via both party lists and single-member constituencies. Russia is also using these elections as a chance to showcase its supposed hold over the Ukrainian territory that it's occupied. Voting will take place in 11 single-member constituencies that Russia has created in the occupied territories in a brazen attempt to force Ukraine's people into taking part in the Russian parliamentary process. Though these elections are meant to signal strength, they also pose a risk to Putin. Though he has always technically been an independent, Putin has long held close ties to the United Russia Party, which is Russia's ruling political party. For these upcoming elections, that party is openly campaigning with Putin for the first time in almost 2 decades, the Financial Times reports. Putin is making it clear where his bread is buttered, and he will want the best possible result for United Russia in September. Unleashing mobilization on the voting populace any time before these elections could spark a political catastrophe for Putin, so he'll wait until October. And when he has what he and United Russia want, then he'll force more unwilling Russians onto the drone-infested front line in Ukraine. Putin has been preparing for mobilization for a while now. Back in February 2026, United 24 media reported that legislation passed toward the end of 2025 has cleared the way for Russia's Ministry of Defense to tap into a reserve army that is 2 million strong. A levy has been placed on reservists at recruitment offices, the outlet says. Key to this new law is that it changes how Russia uses reservists. Since the start of the Ukraine invasion, reservists have only been used to protect critical infrastructure inside Russia, the Kremlin claims. How true that may be is difficult to determine. But now it doesn't matter. The 2025 law opens the door for these reservists to be sent into Ukraine if Putin decides that it's necessary. A foundation for mobilization has been laid. Fast forward to today, and Zelenskyy's claims of an upcoming mobilization are supported by other moves being made. On July 27th, Military reported that Putin has granted Russia's defense ministry access to Russia's civil registry data for military registration purposes. Again, the Kremlin is trying to hide what it's doing here. It claims that this move has been made to simplify the process of providing support to military personnel and their families. Amendments have been made to Article 13 of Russia's On Civil Status Act, allowing the Ministry of Defense to obtain information from the civilian registry to promptly provide the prescribed social guarantees and compensation to military personnel, veterans and their family members, Military says. But behind this lies a caveat. The data the ministry can now access will also be used for military registration purposes. In other words, the Kremlin has given the Ministry of Defense, as well as Russia's National Guard, access to a civilian database that essentially allows both to hunt down reservists ahead of forced conscription. There are other signs that a new wave of Russian mobilization is coming. Ahead of this law change, regional authorities within Russia started holding training sessions to prepare for mass mobilization. The first of those sessions was recorded in Volgograd, though representatives from Rostov, Kalmykia, Astrakhan, and the occupied regions of Crimea, Luhansk, and Donetsk also took part. So if we're looking for clues as to where Russia will likely start mobilizing soldiers, these 7 regions would likely be a good place to start. Also on July 27th, UA.News reported that Russia's National Guard has made an interesting alteration to its civil defense regulations. Those alterations regard the protection of Russia from threats during periods of mobilization, martial law, and wartime. In other words, Russia's National Guard is ensuring that it has the legal structures in place to put down protests and other so-called threats that could result from Putin deciding to mobilize soldiers. The evidence is stacking up. Putin isn't ready to announce it until after the State Duma elections, but he is clearly preparing for a round of mobilization that he promised would never happen. In fact, the Kremlin is still making that promise. In response to Zelenskyy's claims, representatives from Russia's State Duma have dismissed any notion that mobilization is being prepared. Among them is the head of the State Duma Defense Committee, Andrei Kartapolov, who said, "I heard Zelenskyy said something about this, but I can only attribute that to the fact that he probably overindulged over the weekend, leaving his imagination running wild." Kartapolov then went on to assert that Russia's primary method for replenishing military personnel remains and will continue to be the recruitment of volunteers who sign contracts with the Russian military. About that, Mr. Kartapolov. The very fact that Russia relies on volunteer recruitment gives us yet another sign that Zelenskyy is right, and that a wave of mobilization is coming. Recruiting volunteers hasn't been going all that well for Russia in 2026. On May 4th, Pravda reported that Russia had recorded its 5th straight month of losing more soldiers in Ukraine than it had been able to recruit to replenish the numbers. Between December 2025 and April 26, Russia had managed to recruit 148,400 personnel, but had lost 156,735, leaving a shortfall of a little more than 8,000. The Kyiv Independent offers different figures, courtesy of Zelenskyy's July 25th evening address, that cover all of 2026 so far. Ukraine's president says that Russia has sustained 225,500 losses so far this year, and has enlisted 221,000. So the shortfall is smaller, but it's still there, showing us that Putin's recruiters are being forced to repeatedly dip into a well that is starting to run dry. Russia isn't quite facing a full-blown recruitment crisis yet, but as monthly death counts continue to spiral, with June breaking records for Ukraine in 2026 with 39,490 Russian casualties in that month alone, the problem that already exists will develop. Russia is running out of people who are willing to take the massive payouts in exchange for dying in Ukraine, which leaves Putin desperate. So desperate that he's laid all of the groundwork for mobilization. What comes next is almost inevitable. Knowing that Russia's losses are becoming increasingly unsustainable, Putin is trying to exhaust every avenue that is available to him until October. United 24 media reports that Russia is now pushing for 30,000 North Korean soldiers and fresh missile launchers from the same nation to arrive in the country. Again, this comes from Zelenskyy, who claims that Russia has even prepared facilities in the Voronezh region to accommodate the incoming North Korean soldiers. This is a threat not only to Ukraine. Russia is helping North Korea learn warfare, improve its weapons, and gain real combat experience. All of this is a threat to everyone in Asia within range of North Korean missiles, Zelenskyy said. A threat it may be, but it's also a sign that Russia is running out of its own soldiers for positions in the rear. Reservists have been serving in these kinds of roles. Perhaps another sign that those reserves are going to be sent to the front has emerged. The Kyiv Post adds that Russia has also expanded its recruitment from prisons via a new bill that broadens the potential pool of people who can be brought into the army. Russia is now so desperate that it's willing to add people convicted of offenses related to organized crime and mishandling state secrets to the murderers, rapists, and drug abusers that it's been sending from its prisons to Ukraine. Sending people who have mishandled state secrets seems smart. There's definitely no chance that Ukraine could pounce on these people and turn them against Russia. None of this is going to be enough. 30,000 North Korean soldiers account for about a month's worth of losses for Russia. Recruiting from prisons is a tactic that is already in play, and adding a few new types of criminals to the list isn't going to impact Russia's numbers as much as Putin needs. And the volunteer recruitment issue means that Russia has been in the red for all of 2026 and the latter months of 2025. Mobilization has to happen sooner or later. Putin is gearing up to do something devastating to his own people. But how devastating will that be? And will this forced sacrifice be enough to get Russia over the line and, at the very least, enable the capture of Donetsk? Before we answer those questions, this is a reminder that you are watching The Military Show. If you haven't subscribed and enabled notifications yet, then now is the perfect time to hit the buttons and then get back to the video. Russia's pending mobilization will have two key impacts. It'll change the situation on the front and cause massive issues inside Russia. Starting with the front, Ukraine is under no illusions that an influx of 500,000 soldiers is bad news. Ukraine's entire strategy at this stage of the war is to force so much attrition of Russian forces and equipment that Putin is forced to negotiate peace because the losses have grown so severe. We see that in everything that Ukraine is doing. The vast kill zones cause casualties on a massive scale. Strikes inside Russia damage Putin's economy and his war machine from the inside. And with the mid-range drones, Ukraine is ruining Russian logistics and creating opportunities for counterattacks. If Russia pours 500,000 soldiers into Ukraine, that strategy doesn't go away. However, it becomes a lot harder to execute, as Russia will be able to plug gaps in the front line, reinforce defenses, and throw even more meat at Ukraine's fortifications. If this works as Putin hopes, it could speed up the capture of the Donetsk fortress belt cities. However, Russia has a problem, and that problem is explained by Zelenskyy. Scaling up by forcibly recruiting 500,000 soldiers sounds great on paper for Putin. However, major operational problems would emerge, many of them related to the infrastructure that Russia needs to have in place to make these conscripts effective. He will not be able to quickly prepare these people, Zelenskyy says, adding, "This again means that he will send poorly prepared people to the battlefield, and this in turn means heavy losses. Commanders will be forced by Putin to send poorly trained and unready soldiers to the front. Though many of those that Putin mobilize are reservists, most will have only received basic training and will have no idea about the drone-infested hellscape that awaits them in Ukraine. They'll just be told to pack their stuff, engage in a couple of days of training, and then off they go. And if you think that we're exaggerating here, then think again. The awful quality of Russia's training has long been known. As far back as May 2025, the Institute for the Study of War was reporting that Russia had started to rely on the simple and stupid tactic of sending barely trained recruits into assaults. The idea is simple. Those recruits can't do much of anything offensively, but they can soak up bullets and force Ukraine to burn through its drones. In death, they play a small part in helping Russia break fortifications through its own bloody version of attrition. February brought with it a report by United 24 Media, which revealed that some Russian soldiers get as little as 5 days of training before they're shipped out to the front. Russia is offering little more than a crash course on how to become a casualty already. If up to 500,000 soldiers suddenly have to be prepared for war, the country's strained training grounds won't be able to cope. The mobilized will be lucky to even get the handful of days of training that recruits are receiving now. Putin won't care, of course. To him, the mobilized are barely even human. They're just cannon fodder that he can use to batter Ukraine's defenses with meat. The deaths and injuries don't matter to Putin, nor do sacrifices made by the soldiers and their families back home. The only thing that matters to Putin is that he can use Russia's people to secure his legacy as one of the country's great wartime leaders. But Putin should care about the effect of the sacrifice he is demanding. As impactful as mobilization will be on the front, the effect it will have on Russia itself could be enough to spell the end of Putin's reign. We take you back to September 2022, after the special military operation completely failed to topple Ukraine as quickly as Putin claimed it would. Russia had a problem on its hands. Ukraine was fighting back, hard. The soldiers that had been committed to the invasion weren't going to be enough, meaning the Russian military needed an influx of new troops. A partial mobilization was the solution that Putin landed on. Reports indicated that Russia activated 300,000 reserves during this partial mobilization, and many of the problems that Zelenskyy anticipated for the second round occurred. Identifying, training, and evaluating all those who were supposed to enter Ukraine took an eternity, held up by bureaucratic red tape that Russia has since tried to cut with its new laws. However, far more worrying for Putin was the response from the Russian people. This initial round of mobilization happened when support for the Ukraine invasion and for Putin were still quite high. And even then, September 2022 sparked protests all over Russia and, according to Newsweek, led to tens of thousands of Russians running from their own country to avoid having to serve in the military. Now here we are, almost 4 years later, and Putin seems to be planning to do the same thing again, only on a larger scale. Only he's making those plans as the appetite for war in Russia declines, along with his own popularity. Putin's people are frustrated over the state of the Ukraine war right now, and we can see how frustrated they are in the polls. In a July 1st report, TVP World said that a survey carried out by Ukraine's Institute of Conflictology and Analysis of Russia had revealed that 81% of Russians want an immediate end to the Ukraine war. The same survey also found that 73% of 1,600 people quizzed opposed a second wave of mobilization. Putin's approval ratings are also on the wane. On July 20th, United 24 Media reported on the latest results of the Russian Public Opinion Research Center's polling. That center, which is Kremlin-aligned and does everything it can to massage its figures for Putin, found that only 65.1% of Russians approve of Putin's performance. That's a low point for 2026, and it shows that Russians are getting war-weary. Though 65.1% might seem high, remember that this number comes from a polling organization that is essentially controlled by the Kremlin, and many in Russia are hesitant to express disapproval for fear of a knock on the door that might come from Russia's secret police. For any other world leader, a 65.1% approval rating is great. For Putin, who is a dictator running a police state, it's a massive sign that he has become unpopular. It's into this powder keg that Putin plans to throw the lit match of a new round of mobilization. Russia's economy is already crumbling, as the country's budget deficit has reached nearly $77 billion, forcing the Kremlin to request loans from the central bank to cover Putin's insane war spending. The country's labor shortage has reached historic levels, United 24 Media reported on June 5th, which is making it difficult to attract overseas investment due to there being no guarantee that Russia will be able to provide the workers that businesses need. And now, Putin wants to just pull up to 500,000 people out of Russia to send to Ukraine. It will be a sacrifice too far for Russia, and it's a move that's destined to blow up in Putin's face. There's a reason why National Guard laws are being redrafted and training sessions are being held to ensure Russian regions are ready for mobilization. None of that has anything to do with the mobilization process itself. Putin and his cronies know that mobilization will bring with it waves of protests, an exodus of Russian reserves, and a new level of discontent that is far beyond what was seen in September. Russia's people are already tired of Putin's war. They're tired of family members dying and of having to endure a damaged economy, crippled fuel supply lines, and the constant Ukrainian drone strikes against which Putin seems unable to protect them. Mobilization will be political suicide for Putin, and waiting until after the state Duma elections to do it won't change that fact. But then Putin may be thinking that he's in for a penny, so he might as well go in for a pound. After all, the numbers are already brutal. Russia's death toll is huge, casualties keep piling up, and the country already has a demographic crisis that is so bad that it's stealing Ukrainian children to mask the problem. Putin's obsession with Ukraine is already crippling Russia before mobilization, and you can find out how by watching our video. And if you found this video interesting, then hit subscribe and enable notifications so you never miss what's coming next from the Military Show. And thanks for watching.